The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of the dusty general store, and Rose Fletcher knew her life was about to change forever, though not in the way she had imagined when she left Boston 3 weeks ago. She sat inside the cramped compartment, her heart hammering against her ribs, one hand gripping the wooden handle of her traveling case, and the other pressed flat against the seat to steady herself. The Nevada heat pressed through the windows like a physical weight, so different from the cool spring mornings she had left behind. Through the dusty glass, she could see the small town of Carlin spreading out before her, a collection of weathered buildings along a single main street, with the railroad tracks cutting through the heart of it all. The driver's boots hit the ground with a thud, and his shadow passed by her window. Rose took a deep breath, smoothing down the front of her dark blue traveling dress with trembling fingers. She had worn her best outfit for this meeting, the one with the high collar and the small pearl buttons that her sister had given her before she left. Under the layers of fabric, under the petticoats and the carefully arranged skirts, her left leg ended just below the knee, replaced by the sturdy wooden prosthetic that her father had commissioned from the finest craftsman in Massachusetts. The accident had happened when she was 16 years old, a runaway cart on a cobblestone street during a spring rain. The doctors had saved her life but not her leg. In the 6 years since, she had learned to walk again, to move through the world with her head held high despite the stares and whispers. But she had also learned that no man in Boston wanted a wife who was not whole, no matter how pleasant her face or how skilled she was at keeping a home. That was why she had answered the advertisement in the newspaper. That was why she had written to Lucas Montgomery, a rancher in Nevada territory who sought a practical woman to be his wife, someone who could read and write and help him build a life in this harsh land. She had been honest in her letters, painfully honest, describing her situation in clear terms. And he had written back saying that a missing leg did not matter to him, that he needed a partner more than he needed perfection. The door to the stagecoach swung open, and the driver's weathered face appeared in the opening. He was an older man with kind eyes, and he had been patient with her during the long journey westward. "We are here, Miss Fletcher," he said, offering his hand. "Carlin, Nevada territory. This is your stop." Rose gathered her courage and reached for his hand, using it to steady herself as she maneuvered toward the door. The wooden leg made movements like this more complicated, requiring her to plan each shift of weight, each repositioning of her body. But she had long ago refused to let it make her helpless. She emerged into the bright afternoon sunlight, squinting against the glare. The street was dusty and wide, lined with wooden sidewalks that connected the various establishments. She could see a saloon, a mercantile, a barber shop, and what looked like a small hotel. A few horses stood tied to hitching posts, their tails swishing at flies. Several people moved along the sidewalks, going about their daily business, and more than one turned to look at the newcomer stepping down from the stage. The driver climbed up to the roof of the coach and began untying her trunk, the larger piece of luggage that contained most of her worldly possessions. Rose stood beside the coach, her traveling case in hand, and scanned the street for the man who was supposed to meet her here, Lucas Montgomery. She had memorized every detail from his letters, every description he had given of himself. He was 29 years old, 6 years her senior. He owned a cattle ranch about 5 miles outside of town, inherited from his uncle who had died 2 years ago. He was tall, or so he claimed, with brown hair and what he described as an unremarkable face. He preferred plain speaking to flowery language, hard work to idle conversation, and he wanted a wife who could be a true partner in building something lasting in this territory. She looked up and down the street, searching. A woman in a faded calico dress carried a basket toward the mercantile. Two men stood outside the saloon, talking in low voices. A boy of perhaps 10 years old led a mule past the general store, whistling a tuneless song. But there was no tall man with brown hair stepping forward to greet her, no rancher coming to claim his mail-order bride. Rose felt a flutter of anxiety in her chest. Perhaps she was early. Perhaps he had been delayed. She glanced at the driver, who had successfully wrestled her trunk down from the roof and was now setting it on the dusty ground beside her. "Will you be all right, miss?" he asked, genuine concern in his weathered features. "Is someone meeting you?" "Yes," Rose said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "My intended should be here shortly." The driver nodded, but he did not look entirely convinced. He tipped his hat to her. "Safe travels, Miss Fletcher. I hope this land treats you well." Then he climbed back up onto his seat, released the brake, and with a snap of the reins, the stagecoach rolled forward, continuing on its route. Rose watched it disappear down the street, raising a small cloud of dust in its wake, and suddenly she felt very alone. She stood there in the heat, one hand shading her eyes, waiting. Minutes passed. The sun beat down on her dark dress, and she could feel sweat beginning to gather at the small of her back. Her wooden leg, which fit reasonably well most of the time, began to chafe against her residual limb in the heat. She shifted her weight, trying to find a more comfortable position. A woman emerged from the mercantile and paused on the wooden sidewalk, staring at Rose with unconcealed curiosity. Rose met her gaze evenly, refusing to look away first. After a moment, the woman continued on her way, but Rose could feel the assessment in that look, the judgment. More time passed. Rose began to feel foolish standing there in the middle of the street with her trunk and her traveling case. She considered going into the hotel to wait in the shade, but what if Lucas arrived and did not find her? What if he thought she had not come? She was just trying to decide what to do when she heard the sound of hoofbeats approaching from the far end of town. She turned, her heart lifting with hope, and saw a single rider coming toward her at an easy trot. The man sat tall in the saddle, his broad-brimmed hat pulled low against the sun. He wore denim trousers, scuffed boots, and a dusty shirt that might once have been white. As he drew closer, Rose could make out more details. The strong line of his jaw, the breadth of his shoulders, the way he moved with his horse as if they were one creature. He slowed as he approached, then swung down from the saddle with an easy grace. He was indeed tall, perhaps 6 feet, with sun-browned skin and dark brown hair that curled slightly where it touched his collar. His eyes, as he looked at her, were a startling blue-gray, like storm clouds over the ocean. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, taking each other's measure. Rose saw him notice her leg, saw his gaze drop to where her skirts did not quite hide the fact that something was different about the way she stood. But his expression did not change, did not fill with the pity or disappointment she had learned to expect. "Miss Fletcher?" he asked, his voice deep and quiet. "Yes," she said. "And you are Mr. Montgomery, Lucas," he said. "Just Lucas." He stepped closer, and she realized he was studying her face with the same intensity she had been studying his. Whatever he saw there seemed to satisfy him, because the corner of his mouth lifted in what might have been the beginning of a smile. "You are taller than I expected," he said. Rose was 5 feet 7 inches tall, which was indeed above average for a woman. In Boston, she had often felt awkward and oversized next to the petite society girls who seemed to fit so much more naturally into drawing rooms and ballrooms. "I wrote my height in my letters," she said, keeping her voice steady. "If that is a problem, then I suppose we need to discuss our arrangement." "Not a problem," Lucas said quickly. He removed his hat, running one hand through his hair. I only meant it as an observation. You stand tall. That is a good thing out here. This land does not favor the weak." He moved to her trunk, bending to lift it with an ease that spoke of considerable strength. He carried it to his horse, a sturdy bay gelding, and began securing it behind the saddle. "The wagon lost a wheel yesterday," he explained as he worked. "I had to ride in. I hope that is acceptable." "It is about 5 miles to the ranch." "How will I ride?" Rose asked, then immediately regretted the question. Of course, she knew how she would ride. She would ride behind him on the horse, or perhaps in front of him if there was room. The wooden leg would make it awkward, but she had ridden before, though not often. Lucas finished with the trunk and turned to face her. For the first time, she saw something that might have been uncertainty in his expression. "Can you ride?" he asked. "With your leg, I mean." Rose appreciated the directness. She was tired of people dancing around the subject, tired of euphemisms and averted eyes. "I can ride," she said. "I may need help mounting, but once I am seated, I can manage." Lucas nodded. He picked up her traveling case and secured it as well, then turned back to her. "I will lift you up first," he said. "Then I will mount behind you. You will ride in front so I can steady you if needed." Before Rose could respond, he had stepped close to her, so close she could smell the scent of leather and horses and sun-warmed skin. He placed his hands on her waist, his grip firm and sure, and lifted her as if she weighed nothing at all. Rose gasped, her hands instinctively reaching for his shoulders to steady herself. For a moment, she was suspended in the air, held by this stranger who was supposed to become her husband. And then he was settling her onto the saddle, adjusting her position so that her wooden leg hung at a comfortable angle. The whole movement had taken only seconds, but Rose felt oddly breathless from it. No man besides her father and the doctors had ever touched her so matter-of-factly, so completely without hesitation. Lucas swung up behind her with the same easy grace he had shown earlier. The saddle, which had seemed spacious enough for her alone, suddenly felt very small with both of them on it. His chest was pressed against her back, his arms came around either side of her to take up the reins, and she was surrounded by his presence. "Comfortable?" he asked, his voice close to her ear. "Yes," Rose managed, though comfortable was perhaps not the right word. Overwhelmed might have been more accurate. Lucas clicked his tongue and the horse began to walk. They moved down the main street of Carlin, past the curious stares of the townspeople, and Rose kept her back straight and her chin up. She had come too far to let shame or self-consciousness rule her now. They reached the edge of town, and the horse picked up speed, moving into an easy trot. The landscape opened up before them, vast and empty in a way that still took Rose's breath away, even after 3 weeks of traveling through it. The land rolled away in shades of brown and gold, dotted with sagebrush and hardy grasses. In the distance, mountains rose up against the sky, their peaks still carrying traces of snow despite the warmth of late spring. "It is beautiful," Rose said softly. She felt Lucas shift slightly behind her. "It is harsh," he said. "But yes, it can be beautiful too, takes a certain eye to see it." They rode in silence for a while. Rose became aware of the rhythm of the horse's movement, the warmth of Lucas's body behind her, the vast openness of the land around them. The wooden leg, which had been causing her some discomfort, began to settle into a bearable position, and she found herself relaxing slightly. "You were honest in your letters," Lucas said after a time. "About your leg, I appreciate that." "I thought you deserved to know," Rose said. "I did not want you to feel deceived." "Some would have kept it secret until it was too late to turn back," Lucas observed. Rose felt a flash of anger at that. "I am not some, and I will not build a life on deception." "Good," Lucas said simply. "Neither will I." They continued on, the landscape slowly changing as they moved away from town. Rose began to see more signs of habitation. Fence lines marking property boundaries, small groves of cottonwood trees that suggested water sources, and eventually a small herd of cattle grazing in the distance. "Those are mine," Lucas said, noticing the direction of her gaze. "Or ours, I suppose, if we go through with this marriage. I have about 200 head right now, hoping to expand the herd this year if the weather holds." "What do you need from a wife?" Rose asked. "In your letters, you said you needed a partner. What does that mean to you?" Lucas was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. "I need someone who can help run the ranch," he said finally. "Someone who can handle the business end of things, the correspondence and the accounts. I can work cattle, I can mend fences and break horses and do all the physical labor. But the paperwork, the planning, the details, those things do not come as naturally to me. My uncle's wife used to handle all that, and after she died, things got disorganized. I need help getting it all back in order." "I can do that," Rose said. "I am good with figures. My father was a banker in Boston and he taught me to keep accounts." "I know," Lucas said. "You mentioned that in your letters. That is one of the reasons I wrote back." The horse crested a small rise, and suddenly Rose could see Lucas's ranch spread out before them in a shallow valley. It was not large, not by any means, but it had a solid, established look to it. The main house was built of wood and stone, with a covered porch across the front. Behind it stood a large barn, a smaller stable, and several other outbuildings. A windmill turned slowly in the breeze, pumping water up from below the ground. Cottonwood trees, their leaves bright green in the afternoon sun, marked the course of what must be a stream. "This is home," Lucas said, and Rose heard a note of pride in his voice. As they drew closer, Rose could see more details. The house needed some paint, and a few of the fence posts around the main corral were leaning at angles. But the barn looked sturdy, and the animals she could see appeared healthy and well cared for. They rode into the yard, and Lucas brought the horse to a halt near the front porch. He dismounted first, then reached up to help Rose down. His hands closed around her waist again, and he lifted her carefully, setting her on her feet with a gentleness that surprised her. Rose's legs felt shaky after the ride, and she swayed slightly. Lucas kept one hand on her arm until she had steadied herself. "Thank you," she said. He nodded, already turning back to the horse to retrieve her luggage. A door banged somewhere behind her, and Rose turned to see an older woman emerging from the house. She was perhaps 50 years old, with iron-gray hair pulled back in a severe bun and a weathered face that spoke of decades under the Nevada sun. "So she came," the woman said, her voice flat and unreadable. "She came," Lucas confirmed, setting Rose's trunk on the porch. "Rose Fletcher, this is Martha Davies. She has been helping me keep house since my uncle died." Martha looked Rose up and down with sharp, assessing eyes. Her gaze lingered on Rose's leg, and Rose saw her expression tighten with something that might have been pity or might have been disapproval. "A mail-order bride," Martha said. "Never thought I would see the day when Lucas Montgomery had to send away for a wife." "Martha," Lucas said, a warning note in his voice, but Rose stepped forward, drawing herself up to her full height. She had dealt with disapproval before, had faced down the whispers and the sideways glances of Boston society. She would not be cowed by this woman, no matter how established she was in Lucas's household. "I am not some desperate woman with no other options," Rose said clearly. "I chose to come here. I chose to answer Lucas's advertisement, and I am prepared to work hard to make this arrangement succeed. I hope that you and I can work together to that end, Mrs. Davies." Martha's eyes narrowed, but Rose thought she saw a flicker of something that might have been respect in that weathered face. "We will see," Martha said finally. "Come inside. I suppose you will want to wash up after your journey." She turned and went back into the house without waiting for a response. Lucas caught Rose's eye, and for the first time, she saw him smile fully. It transformed his face, warming those storm cloud eyes and revealing a hint of humor she had not expected. "You will do," he said quietly. "I think you will do just fine." The inside of the house was dim and cool after the brightness outside. Rose's eyes took a moment to adjust as Martha led her through a front room that served as both parlor and office. She had an impression of solid furniture, a large desk piled with papers, and a stone fireplace that dominated one wall. Beyond that was a kitchen with a large cast iron stove, a wooden table, and shelves lined with jars and tins. Everything was clean but worn, functional rather than decorative. "The bedroom is back here," Martha said, leading Rose down a short hallway. She pushed open a door to reveal a medium-sized room with a large bed, a dresser, and a washstand. A window looked out over the side yard, where Rose could see a vegetable garden that appeared to be struggling against the dry climate. "You will share this room with Lucas once you are married," Martha continued, her tone matter of fact. "Until then, Lucas will sleep in the barn. I have a small room off the kitchen." Rose nodded, setting her traveling case on the bed. The reality of what she had agreed to was beginning to sink in. She was going to marry this man, this stranger. She was going to share his bed, his life, his future. "The Reverend can come out from town in 3 days," Martha said. "That will give you time to settle in and make sure this is what you both want. We are civilized people, after all. There is no need to rush into anything." 3 days, Rose repeated. It seemed both too long and not nearly long enough. Martha moved to the washstand and poured water from a pitcher into the basin. "Wash up," she said. "Then come to the kitchen. You must be hungry after your journey." She left the room, closing the door behind her. Rose stood for a moment in the silence, taking in her new surroundings. The room was plain but not unpleasant. The bed looked comfortable, covered with a simple quilt in a pattern of blue and white. The floorboards were clean and solid underfoot. She moved to the washstand and looked at her reflection in the small mirror hanging above it. Her face was dusty from travel, her dark hair coming loose from its pins. She looked tired and uncertain, younger than her 22 years, but her eyes, dark brown and direct, held steady. She had made this choice. She would see it through. Rose washed her face and hands, then did her best to tidy her hair. She considered changing out of her traveling dress but decided to wait until later. First, she needed to face whatever came next. When she emerged from the bedroom, she found Lucas and Martha in the kitchen. Lucas had removed his hat and washed up as well, and he stood near the stove while Martha ladled stew into bowls. "Sit," Martha said, gesturing to the table. Rose sat, and a moment later a bowl of stew was placed in front of her. It smelled wonderful, rich with meat and vegetables. Her stomach reminded her that she had eaten very little that day, too nervous to finish her breakfast at the last stage stop. Lucas sat across from her and they ate in silence for a few minutes. The stew was as good as it smelled, hearty and filling, and Rose felt some of her tension begin to ease. "Tell me about Boston," Lucas said after a while. "What was your life like there?" Rose considered how to answer that. "Comfortable," she said finally. "My father was successful in his work. We lived in a good neighborhood, attended church every Sunday, hosted dinners for his business associates. It was a very ordinary, respectable life. But you were willing to leave it," Lucas observed. "After the accident, things changed," Rose said quietly. She had decided to be honest with this man, and honesty meant talking about difficult things. People looked at me differently. The families who used to visit stopped coming. The young men who used to call suddenly had other obligations. It became clear that I was no longer considered a suitable match for anyone of good standing. "Their loss," Lucas said bluntly. Rose looked up at him, surprised. He met her gaze steadily. "Anyone who cannot see past a wooden leg is a fool," he continued. "You are whole where it matters. I could tell that from your letters. You have strength and sense and courage. Those are the things that matter out here." Rose felt something warm unfold in her chest, something that might have been hope or might have been the beginning of affection. "Thank you," she said softly. Martha cleared her throat, breaking the moment. "Well," she said briskly, "that is all very romantic, I am sure, but there are practical matters to discuss. Rose, can you cook?" "Yes," Rose said. "I am not a fancy cook, but I can prepare plain meals." "Can you preserve food, vegetables, and fruits?" "I have helped with that, yes." "Can you sew?" "I can mend and make simple garments." "Can you handle a gun?" That question brought Rose up short. "A gun? No, I have never fired a gun." Martha exchanged a glance with Lucas. "She will need to learn," she said. "We are 5 miles from town out here. There are times when a woman needs to be able to defend herself." "I can teach her," Lucas said. The conversation moved on to other practical matters. The routine of the household, the schedule of chores, the way water had to be managed carefully in this dry climate. Rose listened carefully, asking questions when she needed clarification. This was the life she had chosen, and she was determined to learn everything she could about how to live it successfully. As the afternoon faded toward evening, Rose felt exhaustion beginning to catch up with her. The journey had been long, and the emotional weight of arriving at her destination was taking its toll. Martha seemed to notice. "You should rest," she said. "Tomorrow will be soon enough to start learning the routine." Rose nodded gratefully. She excused herself and retreated to the bedroom, closing the door behind her. For a moment, she simply stood there, letting the silence wash over her. Then she moved to open her trunk, searching for her nightgown. As she lifted out layers of carefully folded clothing, she found the small bundle of letters at the bottom, tied with a ribbon. Lucas's letters to her, and copies of her letters to him. She had saved them all, reading them over and over during her journey west. She untied the ribbon and pulled out the first letter he had sent her. The paper was worn at the creases from being unfolded so many times. His handwriting was bold and clear, easier to read than she had expected. "Dear Miss Fletcher," it began. "I received your response to my advertisement with great interest. You write that you are missing part of your left leg due to an accident, and you worry that this makes you unsuitable as a wife. I want to assure you that I do not see it that way. A missing leg is just a fact, like having brown hair or being tall or needing spectacles to read. It does not define your worth or your capability. What I need is a partner, someone with intelligence and determination, someone willing to work hard to build something lasting in this territory. From your letter, I believe you might be that person." Rose had cried when she first read those words, overcome by the simple matter of factness of them. Lucas had not offered pity or false comfort. He had simply stated that her missing leg did not matter to him, and then he had moved on to talking about what did matter. She folded the letter carefully and returned it to the bundle, then prepared for bed. The wooden leg took several minutes to remove properly, and she winced as she loosened the straps and pulled it free. Her residual limb was red and sore from the long day, and she massaged it gently, trying to ease the ache. Then she pulled on her nightgown, blew out the lamp, and climbed into bed. The mattress was more comfortable than she had expected, and the sheets smelled of sun and fresh air. Through the window, She could hear the sounds of the ranch settling for the night. Horses moving in the corral, the distant lowing of cattle, the rustle of wind through the cottonwood trees. And somewhere out there, Lucas was bedding down in the barn, giving up his own room so that she could have privacy until they were married. Rose closed her eyes and tried to imagine what her life would be like 3 days from now, when she would be Rose Montgomery instead of Rose Fletcher. When she would share this bed with the tall, quiet man who had lifted her onto his horse so carefully, who had told her that she stood tall when so many others had made her feel small. She fell asleep with that thought, and dreamed of wide open spaces and storm cloud eyes. The next morning, Rose woke to the sound of a rooster crowing somewhere outside. For a moment she was disoriented, unsure where she was, and then memory flooded back. Nevada. Carlin. Lucas's ranch. She sat up, reaching automatically for her wooden leg. The morning routine of attaching it was so familiar that she barely had to think about it anymore. Positioning the socket correctly, tightening the straps, making sure everything was secure. She dressed in a simpler gown than she had worn yesterday, a practical cotton dress in a pale green that would not show dust as easily. When she emerged from the bedroom, she found Martha already in the kitchen, starting the fire in the stove. "Good," the older woman said. "You rise early." "That is good. There is much work to be done on a ranch." "What can I do to help?" Rose asked. Martha studied her for a moment, then nodded toward the back door. "There are chickens to be fed. The feed is in a barrel just outside the kitchen door. Scatter 2 scoops in the hen house and collect any eggs you find. Watch out for the red hen. She is mean." Rose found the barrel where Martha had indicated, along with a wooden scoop and a basket for the eggs. The hen house was a small structure behind the main house, and when Rose opened the door, a dozen chickens looked up at her with bright, curious eyes. She scattered the feed, watching as the chickens rushed forward to peck at it. Then she began searching for eggs, finding them tucked into the nesting boxes that lined one wall. Most of the hens moved aside peacefully when she reached for the eggs, but one, a large red hen, fluffed her feathers and pecked sharply at Rose's hand when she came too close. "You must be the mean one," Rose said, pulling her hand back. She waited until the hen moved, then quickly grabbed the 2 eggs from that nest and retreated. By the time she returned to the kitchen with the basket of eggs, Martha had coffee brewing and was mixing batter for flapjacks. Rose set the eggs on the counter and was about to ask what else needed doing when the kitchen door opened and Lucas came in from outside. He had clearly been up for hours already. His shirt was damp with sweat, and there was hay stuck to his sleeve. But he smiled when he saw Rose, and again she noticed how that smile transformed his face. "Morning," he said. "I hope you slept well." "I did, thank you," Rose said. "And you?" "Well enough. The barn is not so bad once you get used to it." He moved to the washstand by the door and cleaned up, then joined them at the table. Martha served flapjacks and bacon, and they ate together as the morning light grew stronger outside the window. "I thought I would show you around the ranch today," Lucas said to Rose. "Let you see what we have here, what needs doing. If we are going to be partners, you should know the full scope of it." "I would like that," Rose said. After breakfast, Lucas led her outside. The morning was cool, but Rose could already feel the promise of heat in the air. They walked first to the barn, where Lucas showed her the milk cow, the horses, and the tidy tack room where saddles and harnesses hung on the walls. "I keep meaning to organize all this better," he said, gesturing at the various tools and equipment. "My uncle had a system, but I never quite learned it. Things have gotten jumbled since he passed." Rose looked around, already mentally sorting and categorizing. She had a natural inclination toward order, and she could see how this space could be made more efficient. They continued on, Lucas pointing out the various buildings and explaining their purposes. The smokehouse, where meat was cured. The root cellar, dug deep into the hillside to keep vegetables and preserves cool. The workshop, where repairs could be made to equipment and tools. As they walked, Rose became aware of something important. Lucas matched his pace to hers automatically, never rushing ahead, never making her feel like she was slowing him down. The wooden leg made her gait slightly uneven, and sometimes she needed to watch the ground carefully to avoid stumbling on uneven terrain. But Lucas simply walked beside her, pointing things out, answering her questions, treating her presence as natural and unremarkable. They ended up near the stream that ran along the eastern edge of the property. Cottonwood trees grew thick along its banks, and the sound of running water was soothing after the dry silence of the rest of the landscape. "This stream is what makes this land valuable," Lucas explained. "In a dry year, it might shrink to just a trickle, but it never fully disappears. That means I can keep cattle here when other ranchers are struggling to find water for their herds." Rose looked at the clear water running over smooth stones. "How much land do you have?" "About 600 acres, Lucas said. "It is not the biggest ranch in the area, but it is enough to support a good herd, enough to build a life on." He turned to face her, and his expression was serious. "I want you to understand something, Rose. This is not going to be an easy life. The work is hard, the climate is harsh, and there will be times when we struggle. But I will work every day to make sure we succeed. I will never ask you to do anything I am not willing to do myself, and I will never blame you if things are difficult. We will face whatever comes as partners, equal in this. That is what I am offering you." Rose felt her throat tighten with emotion. "What do you want from me in return?" she asked. "Honesty," Lucas said immediately, "and effort. I do not expect you to be perfect. I just expect you to try and to tell me the truth, even when it is hard. Can you do that?" "Yes," Rose said. "I can do that." They stood there by the stream, facing each other in the dappled shade of the cottonwoods, and Rose realized that something significant was happening. They were not just two strangers thrown together by circumstance. They were two people choosing each other, choosing to build something together. Lucas reached out and took her hand. His palm was calloused and rough from work, but his grip was gentle. "3 more days," he said quietly. "And then you will be my wife, if you still want to be." "I still want to be," Rose said, and meant it with her whole heart. That evening, after dinner, Lucas suggested they sit on the porch to catch the cooler air. Martha had retired to her room, and Rose found herself alone with Lucas for the first time since she had arrived. They sat in rocking chairs, watching the sun set over the distant mountains. The sky turned incredible shades of pink and orange and purple, colors so vivid they hardly seemed real. "Tell me about your family," Lucas said. "Do you have siblings?" "One sister," Rose said. "Eleanor. She is 3 years younger than me. She married last year, a lawyer in Boston. They are very happy together." "And your parents?" "My father still runs his bank. My mother died when I was 12. Influenza." "I am sorry," Lucas said quietly. Rose nodded. "It was a long time ago. Eleanor and I learned to manage the household between us. Father hired help, of course, but we wanted to be useful." "What about your family?" "My parents died when I was young," Lucas said. "A fever swept through our town when I was 8 years old. They both died within days of each other. My uncle took me in, brought me out here to Nevada territory. He raised me, taught me everything about ranching. He and his wife never had children of their own, so they treated me like a son." "You must miss them," Rose said. "Every day," Lucas admitted. "They were good people. They worked hard and they loved this land. I want to honor what they built here, make it even better." They rocked in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the sounds of the evening. crickets chirping in the grass, a coyote howling somewhere in the distance, the soft nicker of horses in the corral. "I am glad you came," Lucas said suddenly. "I know we barely know each other yet, but I have a good feeling about this about us." Rose turned to look at him. In the fading light, she could just make out his profile, the strong line of his jaw, the way his hair curled slightly at his collar. "So do I," she said. The next 2 days fell into a pattern. Rose woke early, helped Martha with the household chores, and then spent time with Lucas learning about the ranch. She met the ranch hands, 2 brothers named Sam and Pete who helped with the cattle and the heavier work. She learned to recognize the different animals, to understand the rhythm of ranch life. Lucas began teaching her about the business side of things as well, showing her the accounts his uncle had kept, the records of cattle sales and expenses. Rose saw immediately that things were disorganized, that records had not been properly maintained since his aunt had died. "May I work on this?" she asked, gesturing at the papers spread across the desk. "Please," Lucas said. "That would be a great help." So Rose spent hours sorting through papers, creating a proper ledger, organizing receipts and bills of sale. She found she enjoyed the work, enjoyed bringing order out of chaos. It was something concrete she could do, a way to contribute to the success of the ranch. On the evening before the wedding, Martha pulled Rose aside. "I want you to know something," the older woman said. Her voice was gruff, but her expression had softened over the past 2 days. "I was not sure about you when you first arrived. I thought Lucas was making a mistake, sending for a stranger, especially one who had difficulties." Rose stiffened, but Martha held up a hand. "Let me finish," she said. "I was wrong. You have proven yourself these past days. You work hard, you do not complain, and you treat Lucas with respect. That is all anyone could ask. I think you will make him a good wife." "Thank you," Rose said, surprised and touched. "That means a great deal to me." Martha nodded briskly. "Well then, tomorrow you will be married. Let me show you what I have prepared for you." She led Rose to the bedroom and opened the wardrobe. Inside hung a dress Rose had not seen before, a beautiful gown in pale blue with delicate white lace at the collar and cuffs. "It was Lucas's aunt's wedding dress," Martha explained. "She asked me to save it, said she hoped someday Lucas would marry and his wife might want to wear it. I have kept it all these years. I took the liberty of altering it a bit to fit your height. I hope that was not presumptuous." Rose reached out to touch the soft fabric, overwhelmed. "It is beautiful," she whispered. "Thank you, Martha. Thank you so much." That night, Rose lay in bed unable to sleep. Tomorrow she would become Lucas Montgomery's wife. Tomorrow her life would change completely and irrevocably. She thought about Boston, about the life she had left behind. She thought about her father and sister, hoping they would understand why she had made this choice. She had written to them from Carlin, telling them she had arrived safely and that the wedding would proceed as planned. She did not know if they approved, but she hoped they wanted her to be happy. And she thought about Lucas, trying to sort through her feelings for him. She was not in love with him, not yet. How could she be after only 3 days? But she liked him. She respected him. She felt safe with him, felt valued in a way she had not felt since before her accident. Perhaps that was enough to start with. Perhaps love would come later, growing slowly like the hardy plants that managed to thrive in this harsh climate. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright. Martha helped Rose dress in the beautiful blue gown, pinning up her dark hair and weaving small white flowers through it. The flowers came from Martha's garden, carefully cultivated and protected from the harsh sun. "You look lovely," Martha said, stepping back to admire her work. "Lucas is a lucky man." Rose studied herself in the mirror. The dress fit beautifully, and the color brought out the warmth in her brown eyes. For the first time in years, she felt pretty, felt like someone worth looking at. The Reverend arrived mid-morning, a kind-faced man named Reverend Thompson, who made the journey out from Carlin to perform weddings and funerals for the scattered ranch families. He greeted Rose warmly and said he was pleased to meet the woman who had traveled so far to become Lucas's wife. They gathered in the front room, which Martha had decorated with more flowers from her garden. Sam and Pete stood awkwardly in their Sunday best, serving as witnesses. Martha stood to one side, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief, and Lucas stood before the fireplace, waiting for Rose. He wore clean black trousers, a white shirt that looked new, and a vest that had clearly been carefully preserved for special occasions. His hair was freshly combed, his face cleanly shaven. When Rose entered the room, his eyes widened and he smiled. Rose walked toward him, her wooden legs steady beneath her, her head held high. She had practiced walking in this dress, making sure she would not trip on the unfamiliar skirts. Now she moved with confidence, closing the distance between them. She reached Lucas's side and he offered her his hand. She took it, feeling the now familiar roughness of his palm against hers. Reverend Thompson opened his Bible and began the ceremony. Rose listened to the familiar words, the promises they were making to each other. To have and to hold from this day forward, for better for worse, for richer for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part. When it came time to speak her vows, Rose's voice was clear and steady. She meant every word. She was choosing this man, this life, this future. Lucas's voice was equally steady when he spoke his vows. He looked into her eyes as he spoke, and Rose saw in his gaze a promise that went beyond the words. He would stand by her. He would honor what they were building together. "You may kiss your bride," Reverend Thompson said with a smile. Lucas leaned down and Rose tipped her face up to meet him. The kiss was brief and gentle, more a symbol than a passion, but Rose felt it down to her toes. She was married. She was Lucas Montgomery's wife. Martha had prepared a special dinner to celebrate, using some of her precious stores to create a feast. They ate roasted chicken, fresh bread, vegetables from her garden, and a cake she had somehow managed to bake without anyone noticing. Sam and Pete made toasts, wishing the couple happiness and prosperity. Reverend Thompson stayed for the meal, then departed to return to town before dark. As evening fell, Martha and the ranch hands made themselves scarce. Sam and Pete retired to the small bunkhouse where they lived, and Martha pointedly went to her room early, leaving Lucas and Rose alone. They sat together on the porch again, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. The vastness of the night sky still amazed Rose, so different from Boston where the city lights dimmed the stars. "Are you frightened?" Lucas asked quietly. Rose considered the question. "A little," she admitted. "This is all so new." Lucas nodded. "I am a little frightened too," he said, surprising her. "I want to be a good husband to you. I want you to be happy here. I'm afraid I will fail at that somehow." Rose turned to look at him. "You have already been kind and respectful and welcoming. You have treated me as an equal, as a person of worth. That is more than I dared hope for." Lucas reached over and took her hand again. He seemed to like that gesture, she had noticed, holding hands, connecting them physically in a simple, comfortable way. "I think we should go slowly," he said. "I know we are married now, but that does not mean we have to rush into anything. We can take time to get to know each other, to become comfortable with each other." Relief washed over Rose. She had been nervous about this aspect of marriage, unsure how to navigate the physical intimacy that was expected. The fact that Lucas was willing to be patient meant more to her than she could easily express. "Thank you," she said softly. They sat there a while longer hand in hand, and then Lucas walked her to the bedroom door. He kissed her forehead gently. "Good night, Rose," he said. "My wife." "Good night, Lucas," she replied. "My husband." He smiled at that, then turned and walked back outside, heading for the barn where he would sleep for a few more nights, giving her time and space to adjust. Rose prepared for bed, carefully removing the beautiful blue dress and hanging it in the wardrobe. She changed into her nightgown and climbed into bed, and for the first time since arriving in Nevada, she felt truly at peace. The days that followed settled into a new rhythm. Rose continued to work on organizing the ranch accounts, and she discovered she had a talent for it. She could see patterns in the numbers, could identify areas where money was being wasted or opportunities for profit were being missed. "Look at this," she said to Lucas one afternoon, spreading papers across the kitchen table. "You have been selling your cattle at the stockyards in Carlin, but the prices there are lower than what you could get if you drove the herd to Elko. It is only 30 miles farther, but the rail connection there is better, so the buyers pay more. Even accounting for the extra cost of the drive, you would make significantly more profit." Lucas studied the figures she had laid out. "I never thought about that," he said slowly. "We always sold in Carlin because it was closer, but you are right. This makes sense." He looked up at her, admiration clear in his eyes. "You are good at this," he said. "Really good. We are going to do well together, Rose." Rose felt warmth spread through her chest at his words. She was contributing, making a real difference. She was not just a burden or a charity case. She was a true partner in this enterprise. About a week after the wedding, Lucas suggested they ride out to check on the cattle in the far pasture. Rose had been riding more often, growing comfortable with sitting in front of Lucas on his horse. But this time, he suggested something different. "I think you should learn to ride on your own," he said. "We have a gentle mare that would be perfect for you. That way you could come and go as you please, have more independence." Rose felt a flutter of nervousness. She had ridden alone before her accident, but that had been years ago. Could she manage it with the wooden leg? "I am not sure," she said hesitantly. "I will help you," Lucas said. "We will go slowly. But I think you can do it, Rose. I think you can do just about anything you set your mind to." So they spent the next several days working together in the corral. Lucas brought out a sweet, tempered sorrel mare named Daisy, and he taught Rose how to mount from a special block, how to position herself in the saddle with the wooden leg secured safely, how to use the reins to guide the horse. Rose fell twice during those lessons, both times when she was trying to dismount, but Lucas was always there to catch her, to help her up, to encourage her to try again. "You are doing great," he said after one particularly good session. "In a few more days, you will be riding out on your own." Rose wiped sweat from her forehead, exhilarated and exhausted. "I never thought I would be able to do this again," she said. "Thank you for believing I could." "You stand taller than anyone I know," Lucas said, and the way he looked at her made Rose's heart skip a beat. That night, Lucas did not return to the barn. Instead, when Rose emerged from the bedroom in her nightgown, she found him sitting on the edge of the bed, looking uncertain. "I thought maybe I could stay tonight," he said. "If you are comfortable with that, we do not have to do anything. I just thought it might be nice to be close to you." Rose's heart was beating fast, but she nodded. "I would like that," she said. They lay down together, Lucas in his nightshirt and Rose in her gown, with the blankets pulled up between them. Lucas reached out and took her hand, their fingers intertwining. "This is nice," he said softly. "Yes," Rose agreed. "It is." They talked quietly in the darkness, sharing more stories from their pasts, their hopes for the future. And eventually, lulled by the warmth and the closeness, Rose drifted off to sleep with her hand still clasped in Lucas's. She woke once during the night to find Lucas curled around her, his arm draped protectively over her waist. Instead of feeling trapped or frightened, she felt safe. She wiggled back against him slightly and fell back asleep with a smile on her face. Summer deepened, bringing intense heat that baked the land and turned the grass brown. Rose learned to adapt to the climate, learning which hours of the day were too hot for serious work and which were more forgiving. She took over more and more of the household management, working with Martha to preserve vegetables from the garden, to manage the food stores, to keep the house running smoothly. And she continued to build her relationship with Lucas. They shared meals and conversation, worked side by side on ranch projects, and spent evenings on the porch watching the sun set. The physical intimacy between them grew gradually, naturally. A kiss goodnight became a longer kiss. Holding hands led to gentle embraces. And one night, about a month after the wedding, their relationship finally became a true marriage in every sense. Lucas was patient and gentle, attuned to Rose's nervousness. He made sure she felt safe, felt cherished. And when it was over, Rose lay in his arms feeling closer to another person than she ever had before. "I love you," Lucas whispered against her hair. "I did not expect that to happen so fast, but I do. I love you, Rose." Rose felt tears prick her eyes. She had not expected to find love in this arrangement either. She had hoped for respect and partnership, had dreamed of companionship at best. But somehow, without her fully realizing it was happening, she had fallen in love with this quiet, strong man who saw her for who she truly was. "I love you too," she whispered back. "So much." In August, a crisis arose that tested them both. One of the ranch hands, Pete, was thrown from his horse while trying to rope a calf. He hit the ground hard and did not get up. His brother Sam came racing back to the house for help, his face white with fear. Lucas immediately saddled his horse and rode out, taking medical supplies. Rose wanted to go too, but Martha convinced her to stay back and prepare a place for Pete in the house where they could tend to him more easily. It was late afternoon by the time Lucas and Sam brought Pete back in a wagon. He was conscious but clearly in pain, his leg bent at an unnatural angle. "It is broken," Lucas said grimly. "Badly broken. We need to set it, and we need to do it soon." Martha had experience with ranch injuries, and between her and Lucas, they managed to set Pete's leg while Rose held his hand and tried to offer what comfort she could. The young man bore it stoically, only letting out occasional groans of pain. Once the leg was splinted and wrapped, they made Pete comfortable on a cot in the front room. The break was clean, Martha said, and if it was cared for properly, it should heal well. But Pete would be unable to work for months. That night, after Pete had finally fallen asleep with the help of some laudanum, Lucas sat at the kitchen table with his head in his hands. "I cannot afford to hire another hand to replace Pete while he heals," he said quietly. "Not with the prices we have been getting. We will have to manage with just Sam, which means some work will not get done." Rose sat down beside him. "Then I will help more," she said. "I can do more than I have been doing." Lucas looked at her, concern in his eyes. "Rose, you already do so much." "I can do more," she insisted. "I can help move cattle, I can mend fences, I can do whatever needs doing. I'm not fragile, Lucas, I am strong. Let me prove it." Lucas studied her face for a long moment, then slowly nodded. "All right," he said, "but you tell me if it becomes too much. I will not have you hurt yourself trying to keep up." So Rose took on more physical work around the ranch. She helped Sam move cattle from one pasture to another, spending long hours in the saddle on Daisy. She learned to repair fence posts, swinging a heavy post hole digger with determination, despite the blisters it raised on her hands. She helped with the endless task of maintaining the ranch's equipment and buildings. The work was hard, harder than anything she had done in her life. But Rose found she was capable of it. Her wooden legs sometimes made things awkward, sometimes required her to find different ways of accomplishing tasks. But she adapted, improvised, and persevered. One day, as she was working on repairing a section of fence, Lucas rode up and sat watching her for a few minutes. When she finally noticed him and looked up questioningly, he shook his head in what looked like wonder. "You stand taller than anyone I know," he said, echoing the words he had spoken weeks before. "You face every challenge head-on. You never give up. I am in awe of you, Rose Montgomery." Rose felt her eyes sting with tears. All her life since the accident, people had looked at her with pity, had seen her missing leg before they saw anything else about her. But Lucas saw her strength, saw her determination, saw her as a whole person rather than a broken one. She climbed through the fence and went to him, and he leaned down from his horse to kiss her. It was a long, sweet kiss, full of love and respect and partnership. As autumn approached, Pete's leg healed well enough for him to begin moving around on crutches. He would not be able to do full ranch work for a while yet, but he could handle lighter tasks, which eased some of the burden on Sam and Rose and Lucas. The cattle drive to Elko that Rose had suggested turned out to be a great success. Lucas got significantly better prices for his cattle, and the additional profit made a real difference to the ranch's financial situation. He came home from the drive and swept Rose up in a hug, spinning her around despite her startled laughter. "You were right," he said, setting her down but keeping his arms around her. "That was brilliant thinking, Rose. We made enough extra to hire another hand for next year and still have money left over. You saved us." Rose leaned against him, feeling proud and happy. "We saved us," she corrected gently. "We are partners, remember? We do this together." The first real cold came in late October, bringing frost that glittered on the grass in the mornings and a sharp bite to the air. Martha started spending more time indoors, the cold bothering her joints. She began teaching Rose more of her cooking secrets, the recipes she had perfected over years of ranch cooking. "You are doing well," Martha told Rose one afternoon as they worked together to prepare beef stew. "Better than I expected, if I am honest. You have earned your place here." Coming from Martha, that was high praise indeed, and Rose treasured it. One evening in November, as Rose and Lucas sat together on the porch bundled in blankets against the chill, Rose realized she had something important to tell him. "Lucas," she said, her heart beating fast, "I think I might be expecting a baby." Lucas turned to her, his eyes going wide. "Are you sure?" "Not completely sure," Rose admitted. "But I have missed my monthly time twice now, and I have been feeling unwell in the mornings. I think it is possible." Lucas set down his coffee cup with shaking hands. Then he pulled Rose into his arms, holding her tightly. "A baby," he said, his voice full of wonder. "Our baby, Rose, that is incredible." "You are happy?" Rose asked, needing to hear him say it. "Happy." Lucas pulled back to look at her, and she could see tears in his eyes. "I am overjoyed, overwhelmed, terrified, but mostly happy. So happy, Rose." They held each other as the stars came out overhead, talking in quiet voices about the future. About what kind of parents they wanted to be. About how they would raise their child in this harsh but beautiful land. As winter closed in, Rose's pregnancy became more certain. Her body changed, her belly slowly rounding with the growing life inside her. Lucas became even more protective, insisting she not do any heavy work, worrying constantly about her health. "I am pregnant, not ill," Rose reminded him gently when he tried to prevent her from even gathering eggs one morning. "I can still do things, Lucas. I need to do things or I will go mad with boredom." They compromised, Rose taking on tasks that were not too strenuous while Lucas and Sam and a newly mobile Pete handled the heavier work. Martha fussed over Rose constantly, making sure she ate enough, that she rested enough, that she did not overdo things. Rose had never felt so cared for, so valued. Her family in Boston wrote regularly now, her father and sister sending letters full of news and good wishes. Eleanor was expecting her first child as well, due about the same time as Rose, and they exchanged letters about their experiences, bridging the distance between them. The winter was hard, with snow covering the ground for weeks at a time and temperatures dropping well below freezing. But the house was warm and solid, and Rose felt safe there with Lucas and Martha and the others. They spent long evenings by the fire, Lucas reading aloud from books while Rose did mending or worked on making baby clothes. Spring came slowly, the snow melting in patches, the frozen ground gradually thawing. Rose was heavily pregnant now, her belly large and round, the baby moving constantly inside her. She had trouble sleeping, her back aching from the unfamiliar weight she carried. Lucas was incredibly attentive, rubbing her back when it hurt, helping her put on her shoes when she could no longer reach her own feet, fetching whatever foods she craved at odd hours. In early April, Rose went into labor. It was a long, difficult process that lasted through the night and into the following afternoon. Martha stayed with her the whole time, coaching her through the contractions while Lucas paced anxiously in the other room. Finally, as the sun was setting on the second day, Rose gave one final push and heard the incredible sound of a baby crying. Martha worked quickly, and then she was placing a small, red-faced bundle into Rose's arms. "A boy," Martha said, her weathered face soft with emotion. "You have a son, Rose." Lucas came in then, his face drawn with worry and exhaustion. But when he saw Rose holding their baby, his expression transformed into something Rose had no words for. "A son," he breathed, coming to sit on the edge of the bed. He reached out with one finger to stroke the baby's tiny hand, and the infant's fingers closed around his, gripping tight. "What should we name him?" Rose asked, looking down at the small miracle in her arms. Lucas was quiet for a moment. "I was thinking," he said slowly, "that we could name him James after my uncle, if you agree." "James Montgomery," Rose said, trying out the name. "Yes, I think that is perfect." Little James Montgomery was a healthy, hearty baby with a good set of lungs and a strong appetite. Rose, despite her exhaustion, felt more joy than she had ever imagined possible as she nursed her son and watched Lucas's face as he gazed at them both. The next few months were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. James was a demanding baby, wanting to eat frequently and not sleeping for long stretches. Rose and Lucas took turns walking with him when he was fussy, and more than once, Rose woke in the night to find Lucas standing by the window, rocking their son and singing to him in a soft, off-key voice. As spring turned to summer, James grew and thrived. He started smiling, then laughing, then reaching for things with his tiny hands. Lucas was completely besotted with his son, spending every free moment with him. "I never knew it could be like this," he told Rose one evening as they watched James playing on a blanket in the grass. The baby was trying to catch a butterfly that kept landing just out of reach, and his efforts were adorably unsuccessful. "I never knew I could love someone this much, feel this connected to another person. He is ours, Rose. We made him together." Rose leaned against Lucas's shoulder, feeling the truth of his words in her own heart. This life they had built together, this family they had created, was more than she had ever dared to dream of when she stepped off that stagecoach nearly a year ago. The ranch continued to prosper under their joint management. Rose's organizational skills and Lucas's hard work combined to make the operation more efficient and more profitable. They were able to expand the herd, hire more help, and make improvements to the buildings and equipment. Sam eventually moved on to start his own small ranch, and Pete brought his new wife to the ranch, giving them the small bunkhouse to live in. Martha, though getting older, remained a steady presence, now teaching young Mrs. Pete the secrets of ranch cooking and household management. When James was about 15 months old, Rose discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, her body knowing what to expect. And in the spring of their 3rd year of marriage, she gave birth to a daughter they named Lucy, after Rose's mother. Lucy was different from James from the very beginning, quieter and more observant. She had Rose's dark eyes and Lucas's curling hair, and Lucas declared she was the most beautiful baby girl who had ever existed. Life on the ranch settled into a happy rhythm. The work was still hard, the climate still harsh, but Rose had learned to thrive in this land just as the hardy plants and animals did. She had found her place, her purpose, her people. One evening, when James was 3 years old and Lucy was a toddler just learning to walk, Rose stood on the porch watching her family. Lucas was in the yard with James, teaching him how to throw a rope. The boy was too small to actually lasso anything, but he tried with serious concentration, and Lucas praised every attempt. Lucy sat on the porch steps, clapping her hands and laughing at her brother's antics. Martha sat in a rocking chair, shelling peas and smiling at the scene before her. Rose thought back to that day she had arrived in Carlin, frightened and uncertain, not knowing if she was making a terrible mistake. She thought about how Lucas had lifted her onto his horse without hesitation, how he had told her she stood tall, how he had seen her worth when so many others had only seen her wooden leg. She thought about all the moments that had brought them to this point, the quiet conversations, the gradual building of trust, the realization that they were falling in love, the challenges they had faced together and overcome, the family they had created. Lucas looked up and caught her watching them. He said something to James, then jogged over to the porch, pulling Rose into his arms. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, kissing her forehead. "I am thinking about how grateful I am," Rose said honestly, "for all of this, for you, for the life we have built together." Lucas smiled, that full, warm smile that still made her heart skip a beat even after all this time. "You stand taller than anyone I know," he said, echoing the words that had become something of a private motto between them. "And I am grateful every day that you chose to answer my advertisement, that you were brave enough to come out here and take a chance on me." "Best decision I ever made," Rose said, reaching up to kiss him. James called for his father to come watch another attempt at roping, and Lucy started fussing for attention. Martha needed help carrying the peas inside. The evening chores still needed doing, and tomorrow would bring a full day of work as always. But as Rose turned to go inside, Lucas caught her hand, pulling her back for one more kiss. "I love you," he said simply, "more than I can ever fully express. You made my life complete, Rose Montgomery. You and our children. You are everything I never knew I was missing." Rose felt tears prick her eyes, but they were happy tears. "I love you too," she said, "with everything I am." As the years continued to pass, the Montgomery ranch grew and prospered. Lucas and Rose became known throughout the region as a formidable partnership, respected for their business acumen and their integrity. Other ranchers sought Lucas's advice on cattle breeding, and more than one struggling ranch sent their wives to learn bookkeeping from Rose. James grew into a strong, confident boy who loved ranch life and seemed born to it. Lucy was quieter but no less capable, with a gift for working with horses that amazed everyone. When James was 7 and Lucy was 5, Rose gave birth to twin boys, Daniel and Thomas, bringing even more noise and chaos and joy to the household. Martha lived to see all 4 grandchildren, as she called them, grow past their toddler years. She passed away peacefully in her sleep when James was 10, and the whole family mourned the loss of the woman who had been such an important part of their lives. They buried her on the ranch, under the cottonwood trees by the stream she had loved. As the children grew, Rose made sure they understood the value of hard work, the importance of integrity, and the truth that a person's worth was not determined by their physical perfection. She told them about her accident, about the wooden leg she wore, about the challenges she had faced and overcome. "Your mother is the strongest person I have ever known," Lucas told them. "She taught me that true strength is not about what your body can do. It is about what your heart and mind can accomplish when you refuse to give up." James, when he was 12, asked his mother about her life before she came to Nevada. "Were you sad there?" he asked. "In Boston?" Rose considered the question carefully. "I was lonely," she said finally. "I felt like I did not fit anywhere, like I was always going to be on the outside looking in. But then I came here, and I found a place where I could belong, where people valued me for who I was rather than judging me for what I was missing. I found your father, and together we built this life. So no, I am not sad about Boston. It brought me here, and that is everything." When James was 16, he fell for a girl in town, the daughter of the mercantile owner. Lucas and Rose watched with amusement and affection as their oldest son courted her with all the earnest intensity of first love. "Do you remember when we first met?" Rose asked Lucas one evening as they watched James ride off toward town, dressed in his best clothes. "Every detail," Lucas said. "You stepped off that stagecoach looking terrified and determined all at once. I thought you were the bravest person I had ever seen." "I was so scared," Rose admitted. "I thought you would take one look at me and send me back to Boston." "I took one look at you and thought I was the luckiest man alive," Lucas corrected, "and every day since then has proved me right." Lucy, at 14, announced she wanted to train horses professionally. Rose and Lucas supported her ambition, helping her start her own small training operation on a corner of the ranch. She had a natural gift for it, a patience and understanding with horses that led to impressive results. The twins, Daniel and Thomas, were 10 and already showing distinct personalities. Daniel was scholarly, always with his nose in a book, dreaming of perhaps studying law someday. Thomas was more like Lucas, happiest when working with cattle and managing the practical aspects of ranch life. As Rose approached 40 years old, she sometimes could hardly believe the life she had built. The frightened young woman who had stepped off the stagecoach in Carlin seemed like a different person, someone from another lifetime. One day, as she was working in the ranch office, going over accounts as she had done countless times before, she heard a commotion outside. She walked to the window and saw Lucas and all 4 children riding into the yard together, laughing and calling to each other. Lucas looked up and saw her in the window. He waved, and even from a distance, she could see the love in his eyes, the contentment in his expression. Rose waved back, her wooden legs solid and steady beneath her, her heart full of joy. She had traveled so far, not just in miles but in every way that mattered. She had found love, had built a family, had created a life of purpose and meaning. And she owed it all to a simple advertisement in a Boston newspaper, to the courage to answer it, and to a cowboy in Nevada who had seen past her wooden leg to the woman beneath. She owed it to Lucas, who had told her she stood tall and had spent every day since proving he meant it. That evening, after the children had gone to bed and the house was quiet, Rose and Lucas sat on the porch as they had done so many times over the years. The wooden planks beneath their rocking chairs were worn smooth by time and use. The view was the same as it had always been, The barn and outbuildings, the corral, the mountains in the distance. But everything was different too. They were different. They had grown and changed and built something remarkable together. "What are you thinking?" Lucas asked, reaching over to take her hand. Rose considered the question, trying to find words for the overwhelming gratitude and contentment she felt. "I am thinking about how perfect this moment is," she said finally. "Not perfect because there are no problems or challenges. We will always have those. But perfect because we are facing them together, because we have built something strong enough to weather anything." Lucas brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "I could not have said it better myself." They sat in comfortable silence, hand in hand, as the stars came out overhead. The night was cool but not cold, the air clean and clear. From somewhere in the distance came the sound of cattle lowing, a sound that had become as familiar to Rose as her own heartbeat. "You ever regret it?" Lucas asked suddenly. "Leaving Boston, coming out here, taking a chance on a stranger." Rose turned to look at him, seeing the man she loved illuminated by the soft light spilling from the kitchen window. His face bore more lines now. His hair was starting to gray at the temples, but to her, he was as handsome as he had been that first day. "Never," she said firmly. "Not for one single moment. You gave me a life, Lucas. A real life, full of purpose and love and belonging. You saw me when others looked past me. You valued me when others dismissed me. You told me I stood tall when I felt small and broken. How could I ever regret that? You gave me just as much," Lucas said quietly. "You saved this ranch with your mind and your determination. You gave me a family, a purpose beyond just surviving. You made me better than I was." Rose leaned over and kissed him, a soft, lingering kiss full of years of love and partnership. "We made each other better," she said when they parted. "That is what the best marriages do." The sound of a door opening made them both turn. James emerged from the house, clearly dressed for riding out despite the late hour. "Going to see Sarah?" Rose asked with a knowing smile, referring to his sweetheart in town. James had the grace to look sheepish. "If that is all right. I will be back before dawn to help with the morning chores." "Be safe," Lucas said, "and respectful." "Always," James promised and jogged off toward the barn to saddle his horse. "He's going to marry that girl," Rose said, watching her eldest son disappear into the darkness. "I know," Lucas agreed. "And we will help them start their own place, same as my uncle helped me." "The circle continues," Rose mused. As the night deepened, they finally went inside, checking on the younger children before retiring to their own room. Rose removed her wooden leg, as she did every night, setting it carefully beside the bed. The stump of her leg was marked with old scars, the skin tough and weathered from years of use. Lucas, who had helped her with this routine countless times, handed her the salve they used to keep the skin healthy. It was such a familiar, comfortable ritual, with no awkwardness or shame. Rose rubbed the salve into her skin, then pulled on her nightgown and climbed into bed. Lucas joined her a moment later, and they curled together as they had done for years, his body warm and solid against hers. "Good night, my love," Lucas murmured against her hair. "Good night," Rose replied, feeling safe and cherished and completely at peace. She drifted off to sleep thinking about the next day, about the work that would need doing, about the life they would continue building together. She thought about her children and their futures, about the legacy she and Lucas were creating. And she thought about that young woman on the stagecoach, so frightened and uncertain, who had no idea how wonderful her life was about to become. In the years that followed, Rose and Lucas continued to thrive. James did indeed marry Sarah, and they built a house on the far corner of the Montgomery ranch, starting their own cattle operation with Lucas's help and guidance. Within 2 years, They had given Rose and Lucas their first grandchild, a baby girl named Rose after her grandmother. Lucy expanded her horse training business, gaining a reputation that extended well beyond Nevada territory. She eventually married a young veterinarian who came through Carlin, and together, they combined their skills to create a thriving business. Daniel went off to San Francisco to study law, just as he had dreamed. Thomas stayed on the ranch, becoming Lucas's right hand in managing the cattle operation. As Rose entered her 50s, her dark hair began to silver, and she moved with a bit more caution than she had in her youth. But she was still strong, still capable, still the steady force at the heart of the Montgomery family. Lucas aged alongside her, his body bearing the marks of decades of hard ranch work. But his love for Rose never diminished. If anything, it grew deeper with each passing year, rooted in shared experiences and unwavering partnership. One day, when Rose was 55, she and Lucas took a ride out to the stream where they had stood so many years ago, when she first arrived at the ranch. The cottonwood trees had grown larger, their shade deeper and more encompassing. They dismounted and stood by the water, listening to its familiar burble over the stones. "You remember standing here?" Lucas asked. "When I told you this would not be an easy life." "I remember," Rose said. "And you were right. It has not been easy, but it has been good. It has been so good, Lucas." He pulled her close, and they stood together under the cottonwoods, two people who had started as strangers and had become everything to each other. "You stand taller than anyone I know," Lucas said, the words he had spoken so many times over the years, words that had become a declaration of love more profound than any poetry. "And you stand beside me," Rose replied, the response she had developed over time. "Always beside me, never behind or ahead. Together." "Together," Lucas agreed. As the sun set that evening, painting the Nevada sky in brilliant colors, Rose and Lucas Montgomery rode back to their ranch, their home, their life. Behind them lay decades of hard work, challenges overcome, and love deepened through shared experiences. Ahead lay more years together, grandchildren to spoil, a legacy to pass on to the next generation. Rose thought back one more time to that terrified young woman on the stagecoach, the woman who thought her life was effectively over because she had a wooden leg. How wrong she had been. How wonderfully, gloriously wrong. Her life had not ended with the accident that took her leg. It had simply taken a different path, one that led her to this harsh, beautiful land, to the man riding beside her, to the family and home and purpose she had found here. She had answered an advertisement for a mail-order bride, expecting little more than security and respectability. Instead, she had found love, partnership, and a life richer than she had ever imagined possible. And it had all started with a cowboy who looked past her wooden leg and told her she stood tall. As they rode into the yard, their children and grandchildren were gathered for their weekly family dinner. Voices called out in greeting, small children ran to meet them, and the house glowed with warm light and the promise of good food and better company. Lucas helped Rose dismount, his hands as gentle and sure as they had been on that first day so many years ago. She stood beside him, her wooden leg steady beneath her, her head high, her heart full. "Home," she said simply. "Home," Lucas agreed, and together they walked toward the house, toward their family, toward the future they had built one day at a time, one choice at a time, one moment of courage at a time. And in the years that remained to them, years full of laughter and grandchildren and the quiet satisfaction of a life well lived, Rose Montgomery never forgot that she owed it all to the courage to answer an advertisement, to travel to an unknown land, and to trust a stranger who saw her worth when so many others had not. She owed it to Lucas Montgomery, the cowboy who had told her she stood tall, and who had spent every day since then proving that he meant it with his whole heart.